Hey there, and welcome to the Totally Fierce Crochet channel. My name's Thomas, and welcome to a very snowy day here in February in Germany. And of course, I had to run out to test my new awesome structured hat. And of course, I will also show you in this tutorial how you can make it for yourself. It uses a few very interesting techniques like the double knit, but you will also learn how to work with cables. But don't worry if you don't have a cable needle or knitting cables. I will also show you how you can make it without by using just a yarn needle, so you can always do something like this and get a beautiful super textured hat. It is really easy to make. You can finish it in just a few hours or during an evening while watching the TV, and it absolutely looks super gorgeous with the cable structure, and you always get this beautiful beaded effect. And in addition, it keeps your head warm when it's snowy and crazy cold like it is today. So I hope you're ready to go, because it gets really cold out here and the snow is falling like crazy. So here we go. This was actually my test piece. It has been a few years since I've worked with cables, so I thought I'd just give it a try, and as you can see, it works beautifully. It looks absolutely stunning with all those little braids coming out. And I can already tell you that it is super easy to make, so no worries at all. I know you can do it. I will not put anything on top for this hat, beanie, call it how you want to. Of course, you can add a pom-pom or get some of those and add them at the top. This was actually a beanie or hat set that had this furry whatever. But I will just leave the top as is. Sometimes less is more, but go ahead if you want to have it. And these are the things you need. First up, the yarn. I'm using this, don't even know if I can, the Pingo First 6. I still have this skein left from a previous project, so I'm going to use that up. Now I probably destroyed the whole skein, but so what? Then of course the Knooking hook. I'm going to use a 6mm Knooking hook, and I have the yarn attached already from a previous project, so I just basically never take them off, so I can use them multiple times, and if there's a good contrast between the colors, then we can always do that. Then of course the yarn needle to sew in the yarn ends. Then the scissors, of course, and most importantly, to create the braids is of course the knitting cable. This is how mine looks, and they come in different shapes, sizes, materials, so go ahead, go to your craft shop and look for a knitting cable. There are also some in wood, and they are all straight, but I think those are quite nice because with that little bump up here, you can definitely hold the stitches a little bit better. But as I mentioned before, it's definitely not that tricky, and you can probably do this without a knitting cable by just using another crochet hook or a stitch marker to take a few stitches away and then continue and then go back. So that's also an option, but I think those work pretty nicely. And with that, we are good to go. And we are going to start with the bottom border, I would say. And this is all done in double knit, so it gets a little bit more fluffy, and it's perfect when you then later on have it over the ears. And since we start out of nothing, other than for my nudie tutorial, we are going to start with an I-cord, and this is how it goes. So let's start with our I-cord, and for that you take a piece of your yarn and wrap it around your head 3 to 4 times, over the ears, around your head. Here we go. So this was mine. I bet you can tell. And then we start again with a slip knot. We grab our knooking hook, and we now start with the I-cord. It doesn't matter how many stitches you make. You just do it until it fits around your head nicely, not too tight, and of course not too loose, because you definitely want to have it like a little bit stretchy. And if the I-cord method is new to you, then here's how it goes. You take the end yarn and wrap it around your hook from the front, and you take the yarn that goes to your yarn ball and wrap it around from the back, and then you push that last loop through the 2 loops on the hook, and this is how you made your first I-cord element. Again, you take the end yarn from the front, you take the yarn that goes to your yarn ball from the back, and then pull that last loop through, and you have the second element. And you do this for as long you have to do it until you reach the size of your head, including the ears. Okay, so I have 60 stitches, and like this I think it should work. And interestingly, here I had only 50. Maybe my head got bigger, who knows? And now we can start. Don't worry about the end yarn. If you still have a longer tail left, this is absolutely fine, because we are going to use this to later on sew together the double knit part, because the double knit part we are going to make in the flat and then put it together, because I think that works a little bit easier. And what's also important to know for the double knit part is that we actually need the double amount of stitches. So when I have 60, in the end I would need, or I have to cast on 120 stitches. I know this sounds pretty weird, but we are basically nooking both sides at the same time. So we always do one side and then the other side separately, so that in the end it gets like this. It's basically 2 pieces together that you get, and this is why we then have to double up our stitch count. But with the I-cord, and I hope you made it with the I-cord and not with the chain, this is actually going to be super easy and super simple, because what we are going to do is we are going to keep this front with the beautiful V-stitches as is, and we are going to work in this side element right here. And the first stitch we already have on our hook, and then we go basically in the back loop and pick up our first loop. And now we push our I-cord a little bit to the front, because now what we are going to do is to go in basically the back loop from the back. I don't know how else I could explain it. And grab our first loop up, and then go in the front loop of it, and bring our next loop up, so that within one stitch basically we can pull the yarn up, we can pull the loops up twice. And this of course only works with the I-cord, and with that we can still keep our front part here. So I'll show it again. You push it a bit towards yourself, and then you go in the back or in the behind loop and pull the loop up, and then we go in the front. The front one is always a bit tricky, but it's easier to grab the one in the back first. And then again in the back, and then the one in the front, and like that we can double up each stitch. So in the end I will have my 120, and you go along for as long as your I-cord was, always pulling 2 loops from each stitch right until the end, and this is where I'll meet you back. And don't worry, this will get super full, I can tell you already, but it's all good. It will all make sense after the first few rounds, and you get a super pretty double knit border. But let's do the exhausting part first. So here we are at the end. I told you this is going to be a little bit a little overkill of loops, especially when you have a bigger head like myself. So, and also for those who always wanted to know what to do with projects that are a little bit bigger, like blankets or whatever, you just have it all on the helper yarn, and then you pull it all on it in all its 100 and stitches glory, and then you turn, and then we can start the first real round of the double knit. And for that we are going to grab the first loop, and then we take our yarn to the back, because now we make a knit stitch. Then we take the yarn to the front, grab the next loop, wrap the yarn around this just pulled up loop, and then take the next loop, knit stitch, then again yarn to the front, pick up the next loop, yarn to the back, and knit stitch all along until the end. And this we do for as many times as we need. I will meet you once I'm at the end of this round, and then show you how to start the back round, and then we can then move along until we have the size of your border, and you are fully flexible. Make it as big and high as you want to. That is absolutely up to you. Personally, I love when the border can cover both of my ears to keep them warm, but that is up to you. So see you at the end of this very first double knit round. And here I am at the end of the round. My last stitch was actually like the yarn to the front, and then I just picked up that last loop, which is correct, because by doubling it you always have an even number of chains and or loops. And now we can take out the helper yarn first. This will also be a bit tight, so be aware. And then we can drag it, or drag our work on the back on the helper yarn, and we can then start. And we do the exact same thing. We are going to start with a knit stitch in the first loop, and then again yarn to the front, pick up the next loop, yarn to the back, go into the next loop, and knit stitch, yarn to the front, yarn to the back, knit stitch all along. And again, we do this for as long as you want your border to be. And what you can also do is whenever you take the yarn to the front and grab up the next loop, make sure to push that to the back a little bit, because this in the end will then be on the other side of our border. But this is optional. Usually the stitches will align later on in a way where you have the double knit on both sides, so no issues here. And I'll meet you once I have my border ready, and then I show you how to finish it and sew it together, and then start with the top part with our cable. So see you then. So I reached the end of my double knit border, and I think it looks absolutely pretty on both sides. It's super squishy and will definitely keep your ears warm. And now we can finish the border off. And for that, we are simply doing a cast off. So we pick up our first loop, and we are always going to cast off 2 loops together. So we end up having like our main pattern in front. And what I would also recommend you would be that you have the nice border in the front of your work. I mean, if in the end it doesn't work, you can always then move it around, but I think like this it is a bit easier. And you just take the 2 loops, yarn over and pull it through, and then we go pick up the next 2 loops, yarn over, pull it through, and slip stitch. And this we do all along, so always 2 loops and then slip stitching. So in the end we will go back to our original stitch count that we had, because otherwise it wouldn't make any sense to continue with the hat or the beanie with the double amount of stitches. And I'll meet you at the end so we can then sew the border part together. And this was the last one. What we can do is to take out the helper yarn. We won't need it for our border, and I will also just drag the yarn a little bit out, or the loop a little bit out, so I can then sew the border together. And for that I will turn my work like this, and now I will take my yarn end from the beginning, from my I-cord, and put it on the yarn needle, because now I will just sew it together in a very simple way, just going stitch by stitch. And once I have it, I will just go down once more. Extra perfect, but what I always do is to like also get parts that are not so pretty, like here at the ending, to look a little bit nicer and cleaner. So it's always good to have some parts where you can then later on hide things. And this shall do. And I can simply cut it so we don't have any yarn ends left. And now I can turn it again, and basically I now have a headband. So if you just want to make yourself a headband, here you go. Super easy, super fluffy, super stretchy. So welcome back, and don't worry, your screen isn't broken. Just seconds ago you saw a red piece, now I have a pink piece. And there's a simple reason. Yesterday, while recording, I apparently tapped on pause and then tapped on recording again after this next step. So it wasn't there when I cut the video. So I had to go back and start another hat, this time in the pink color, because why not? Big guys like me can wear pink too. And this is why now you get like a few minutes of pink before we then go back to red, just to confuse you a little bit. And the last step that I recorded the last time was that I went through the top loop and pushed it to the back like that. And now we are going to cast on the stitches for the top part of our beanie. And we are also going to increase. I have my 60 stitches and I will increase every 10th stitch, and I will show you how to do it. And we will not go into our beautiful line of stitches in the front. We will go like in between or in the back. And of course, my first stitch is already on the hook, so I can then go in the next stitch and grab the next loop. So we can go along stitch by stitch. And if you have to increase, because you will need a stitch count that is divisible by, or is a multiple of 5, then you will have to do the same thing like me. So here there were 8, 9, and 10. And when we increase, it's actually very easy, because then we just go in the stitch in between the two stitches and then just take up the loop as an 11th stitch, and from there we can continue. So let's say you had 48, so you make 2 increases, or you had 50 and then you make it to 55. It's really up to you how many stitches you want to make for the top part. If you want to have it more loose, make more. If you want to keep it very tight on your hat, use the same stitch count, just make sure that it's a multiple of 5. And this we do right until the end of this round. I'm pressing pause now, and I hope I will also press record once I'm done. So this was my cast on. This time it was recorded. Woohoo! And now we can then start with our first row of our top part, and the pattern is really simple. It's always 4 knit stitches, 1 purl stitch all the way around, and we do this for 4 rounds in total before we then start our first cable round. So again, the pattern, we go into our first loop right here, and yarn over knit stitch, then in the second yarn over knit stitch, in the third yarn over knit stitch, and in the fourth yarn over knit stitch. Now we have 4 knit stitches, and then we take the yarn to the front and make a purl stitch, and the purl stitch works as follows. You take the hook, place it behind the next loop, grab the loop, twist your yarn around, and then yarn under, and here you go, the purl stitch. I will show you the purl stitch again. So first we make 4 knit stitches, and then the next purl stitch. So the yarn to the front, grab the next loop from the side, twist the hook around, and yarn under, and pull the yarn through to have the purl stitch. And this we do until we have 4 full rounds of this pattern, and then we can start our first cable round. And when you see me again, miraculously the head will be red again. So just so you know, and have fun, and I'll see you later. Now we can then go on with the cable, and for some of you this might be completely new, so I will of course explain everything. So the first 4 stitches of our round were all knit stitches, and now what we are going to do is we take our cable and we will just pick up the first 2 stitches with our cable. So we hold them down a little bit, and then we go into the 3rd knit stitch, grab the yarn and knit stitch, and then we go into the 4th and knit stitch. And now what we are going to do is we take the cable and move it along so that the 3rd knit stitch that we do is actually the first one on our cable, and then we have the 2nd one, put it over your hook and knit stitch through, and you can now release the cable, because like that, I think you can already see it, we moved the first 2 stitches now to the other side of this group of 4, and the stitch number 3 and 4 are now in the front. And every time we have a round with the cable, we are not purling this center stitch here, we are just going to make another knit stitch, and then we can grab our cable again. So I will show it again. You take the first 2. If you don't have the cable, you can always, even like the yarn needle, you could place it somewhere here, just so you know those stitches you skip first, and then knit stitch, and then go back and take the next 2. And if it's a bit hard to grab, always take your finger and pull it over the hook, and like that you could even do it with the yarn needle. And then again we are at the middle part, so we just slip stitch. I will show you one more. So this is really easy to hold stitches while you work the ones after, and then take them forward and use the other ones from the cable afterwards to create a beautiful braid pattern. And this we do all along until the round is done. So this round usually takes a little bit longer than the other rounds, because we always have to bring in the cable. And to be honest, I don't even know why this is called a cable. But oh well, you never stop learning new things in German, the translation would be like a braid needle, for example, a Zopfnadel, for those who want to learn some German words. So this definitely has nothing to do with the word cable, but if there are some knitters out there who know why this is called the cable, feel free to tell us all in the comments. And I mean, if you have made a few of those cable parts, it definitely gets easier. But in general, I think it's absolutely doable. And now I just let you finish this first cable round, and I'll meet you at the end of it. And I'm at the end. Now we can take out the helper yarn, and the great thing is that the helper yarn is that flexible that you can, even with the braids or with the cable parts, you can get it out and continue with the next round, which I think is pretty awesome, because you might think that it would get twisted, but it doesn't. And now we can continue with our regular rounds, so 4 knit stitches and 1 purl stitch. And now we always have to be a little bit careful to see where the first loop is. Here's the first one, here's the second one, number 3 and number 4, and then in the end, or in between, we have again our purl stitch. And here you can already see like how the yarn then moves, and like that we continue. So it is always 4 rounds like this, 4 knit stitches, 1 purl stitch all along, and then we have another cable round, and you do this for as long as you need to. And just because this is probably very new, I will then come back after I made the next 4 rounds of our pattern. So I'll show you again how to work the cable, and then we can finish it off. So it's really up to you how long you want to have your hat. Some people love to have it a little bit loose at the end, a little bit more pouchy, I would say, and others like to have it fit to their hat. So this is really up to you how many rounds you make. And of course, you can always test it by putting it on your head to see how it fits, and then maybe decide to make another round just to be sure. But you will definitely find the right way. So here we go. I made 4 more rounds of our repeat, and now I will just show you one more time how to work with the cable. So you grab the cable, and then you take the first 2 loops. You could also make it the other way around, so that you then just take them to the back and then take the next 2 loops here to the front, so it creates like this wave. But I will just do it like this. Feel free to always play around with something like this. You have so many options working with those cables. So first I'm going to knit stitch the 2 loops after the 2 loops that we took away, and then we just grab the first one from the cable and the second one after that and just knit stitch, and then we can take the cable out, and for the cable round we have a knit stitch in between, and then we take the next 2 loops and then again take the third one from the set, then the fourth one, and then the first one from the cable and the second one. And this was it. So you continue until you reach the height that you want for your hat. And once I'm there for myself, then I will see you back again. Have fun! So I finished the height of my hat, and I think the pattern and the texture looks absolutely amazing. It's super soft, and now it's time to finish it off, and we do that by starting rounds with decreases, and the easiest way to do so is that in the first decrease round we are going to decrease the 2 middle knit stitches that we had, and we do this by knitting the first one and then taking both of the loops in the middle and yarn over and pull through both of them to decrease them, and then we continue with our pattern. So the last one is of course another knit stitch, and then we have a purl stitch. Now we have our next set. Again, the first knit stitch we do as a regular one, and then we knit stitch 2 together, and then again a knit stitch, and we do this all along before we start our next decrease round. So this was the first decrease round, and we can continue directly. So in the next decrease round we are knit stitching our first stitch, and then we take again the next 2 loops and decrease before then going into our purl stitch. I'll show it again. The first a regular knit stitch, and then we knit stitch the next 2 loops together, and then we have our next purl stitch, and we do this right until the end of the second decrease round. And you probably can guess what's coming in the next decrease round. We are just knit stitching together the 2 left knit stitches of each of our initial clusters, and after this round we just have 1 knit, 1 purl stitch all along, and I'll meet you at the end. And our top part closes more and more. There's not a few stitches left, and we can go on with our decreases. And the next decrease round is again very easy, because we are just knooking together the final knit stitch with our purl stitch by making a knit stitch always 2 together. And if it now gets a little bit tight, always feel free to release the helper yarn and your needle, so you do have a little bit more space and flexibility, because after this round we only have a few stitches left. This was already the end of this round, and we are just continuing. Now we are just decreasing the next 2 stitches together, and also always make sure to like push those stitches a little bit together as well. And now it gets really tight. So I am just pulling that yarn out. Oops. 2 together. And the next 2. And now, as you can see, we only have 6 loops left. And what I will do is I cut the yarn, and then I take my yarn needle, let's see where we are. We are right here. And now I will just go stitch by stitch. And make sure to leave a little loop up here. Here's the next one. Here's one. And I think that was it. So now we can take out the helper yarn. We don't need it anymore. And now I will just push everything together, and I will also make sure to take the yarn through that loop that I left, because now I can then just drag on it to close my top part to create a beautiful little star on top, because that was already the end. And now I will just take the yarn to the inside, and then I will just flip it over and sew that last part in, very similar to a crochet project in the beginning, where you would have like the magic circle. I just go around this centerpiece. Now you can cut the yarn. For hats, I always leave it like a little left over there, just to be completely sure, and then flip it over. And here we go. The beautiful structured cabled hat is done. Nothing to sew in. Everything is already done. And your beautiful hat is ready to get used. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you will have fun nooking this beautiful structured hat, and I hope to see you back again next time, maybe with snow, maybe with sun, who can say. And until then, happy nooking. Bye. Getting dizzy again. Oh, the weather outside is frightful, but the fire is so delightful. And now I'm going home, but let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. So by now, after half an hour out here in the cold, I can tell you the hat passed the test successfully. My head is warm, everything else is not. So I rush back home to warm up. But look how beautiful it is with the snow. And I just have to be careful to not fall on my face.